All right, welcome everyone to the panel Existence as Resistance, Trans Poets on Nationwide Anti-Transness, part of Outright 2023. Thank you so much for joining us. We would first like to thank Gilead and the Mayor's Office on LGBTQ Affairs for their continued support of Outright and all our Center Arts programs. Their support allows us to continue to share our stories regardless of the artistic medium. So please join us as we thank them for their support and play a brief sponsor video.
The average baseball stadium holds about 50,000 people, enough to fill a dance floor the size of a New York City block. It was also the number of people in the US who became HIV positive every year since 2003. Then, something happened. One by one, we said, enough is enough. Instead of waiting for a cure, we took action. We got tested and retested. We talked to each other, and we talked to healthcare providers about HIV prevention options. People living with HIV started treatment right away and stuck to it, which can prevent the spread of HIV through sex. New infections went down, but we still have work to do. So let's all do our part and keep fighting, because together, we can all help stop the virus. Find out what you can do at helpstopthevirus.com.
All right, thank you. Please enjoy the panel.
Hey, what up, everybody? My name is KB. I'm a Black, queer, and trans artist. Thank y'all so much for being here. A little bit about why we're here. We're here to talk about transness. We're here to talk about trans existence, listen to some really cool poems by these amazing trans artists. And I wanted to start by saying, hey, I'm your moderator. And I want to put up a couple of boundaries for our conversation. So first, our panelists are not here to argue about, trans humanity, right? So if you don't believe that trans people are people that deserve respect and dignity, then this is not the conversation for you. Second, our panelists do reserve the right to not answer audience questions, which we will be answering audience questions at the end of this panel for 10 minutes, especially, questions that are offensive, invasive, or asked in bad faith. Again, we want to respect, everyone's identity and everyone's existence in this room. If you share anything that we, talk about today on social media, I promise you it's going to be some quotables from these amazing artists. Please credit these writers because we don't want to contribute to, the stealing of cultural knowledge from trans people and folks of color. And also my last boundary is that this is a brave space. We all, every single person on this panel is affected by the things that we're going to talk about on a daily basis, right? So these are going to be really personal things, and they're going to be personal for some of the people watching. So I can't guarantee that discomfort or that, pain and things won't come up, but I can't guarantee that we are holding this conversation really seriously and really delicately, right? So yeah. Thank you. And thank you for being here and witnessing this conversation today. So now we're going to get into it. I'm going to go to every panelist and introduce you to them, and then also have them read a poem and then answer the question, what interests you in this conversation? Starting with Sophia Faye. Sophia, they, he pronouns, is a queer and trans writer living in LA. Currently, they are the poetry editor at Hooligan Magazine. Their work has appeared in American Poetry Review, Poet Lore, and Sonora Review, among others. They love to beat their friends at Mario Party. If you want to follow Sophia, you can at Sophia Faye Creates. Sophia, let's hear a poem.
Do we have a time length on the poem? I didn't know we were reading one.
Yes, just one. Yeah, one poem, and then answering the question in 5 minutes or less.
Okay. I'm gonna read my poem called Edwin Says I Deserve to Be Loved with Precision. This poem was inspired by my friend Edwin, who is also a trans poet, Edwin Bodney. If you haven't read their work, it's incredible. this was inspired by them saying something that at the time, I don't think they had any idea how much it was going to change my life. Edwin says, I deserve to be loved with precision. I didn't understand what precision meant until I made Nick a smoothie and counted his macros in tablespoons. He says that's not precise, it's only accurate. The difference, he says, is that 1 tablespoon varies in weight depending on the substance, though it is accurately 1 tablespoon. If you measure in grams, 5 grams is always 5 grams. That's the difference between accurate and precise. And if you want to be consistent, you want a measurement that doesn't vary. I imagine when I'm loved with precision, I'll know the weight of it. And then, can you remind me the question?
What interests you in this conversation?
You know, I think I'm interested in this conversation having just like taken some cities off my future book tour list because of everything going on. So that, and then I think it's also always just very special to be able to share spaces with other trans writers. So I think I'm interested in, I think I'm just interested in hearing everyone's point of view here in this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for that intro. Love, love, love that poem, and love, love, love you. So next is Saray Jarrell Johnson, the Saray. Saray, he, him, is a poet from Piscataway, New Jersey. He is the author of Slingshot, winner of the Lambda Literary Award for Gay Poetry. Saray is also a Ruth Lilly Fellow from the Poetry Foundation and has served as the inaugural poet in residence at the Brooklyn Public Library. Watch Night, his forthcoming book of poetry, really excited about this, considers ancestry as history in the context of the Great Black Migration of the 20th century, familial estrangement, and queer family. He's a 2023 NEA Fellow. Please welcome Saray. I'd love to hear a poem from you and answer our question.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for putting this together, KB. Congratulations on the release of Freedom House, and I'm happy to be here. The poem I'm going to do is called Belial and Morningstar and Andromalias and Barakajal and Pedamule and Ronob and Zegon, and that is the Devil's Polycule. Everybody knows I know a secret. I've stared at windows until hands poke through, and I have nursed men left on my doorstep with stern, unshorn nipples like fraying tissue. We learned we could never go home, at least not without making pistols of ourselves. I was made to jaw on your fennel stalk. We were made and raised to raise the fallen and lift them high by their turgid taproots. Everyone's heard I saw 2 king snakes fuck. Everybody knows I know who gets more pleasure. The pleasure arrives for the taker who takes cacophonously, superfluously. The yes, please fuck. The no, go home finish. The yes, please fuck finish. So run home on the white bus, clouded by need. Your mama wonders who's been over, says it was a black. She can smell it. Must have been that blue magic smeared over your pillowcase, my head shape dented and scented and haunting your fingertips. Anyone but a black, she thinks. Someone pretty and black, my mother hopes. In this scene, no one gets what they have wanted. In this scene, you ask Jeeves penis envy. In this scene, you fly me to Arizona, 4 stained fingers, twist, twist inside, push, push. In every mirror, you find a demon, 4 stained fingers, twist, twist inside, push, push. In this house, there is no God but downlink. In this apartment, we take rent in rimming. In this hovel, you flash your dick on path trains. In this shack, I suck you deep on the pier. In this delusion, you kiss me in public. In this delusion, I meet your parents. In this delusion, we have soft babies. In this delusion, you keep a steady job. You are hard work. You're brute labor. You're the original sin in house paint and the tripod upon which the Pythia sat, and words repel you and my tongue does not. And we become sentient and escape and string back into the guardian knot. You ox cart king. You spike silver seller turned gold stroker in the fire and tar woods behind my house, framed in white flame, antlers draped with tiny lights we learned were beetles. You did it. I let you and you did it. Blood, magic, and Hennessy, I'm sorry. I promise you I paid and paid and paid with 8 years of no good dick, with violence. Blood, magic, and Hennessy, I'm sorry. If you must know, I loved you in hoops. First, I'd puke on you, then watch you fold drawers, little squares of black and red hook houses. Daddy, I look for you in other faces changed by years of no good dick and violence. In this scene, I Google penis and be my stern, unshorn nipples like fraying tissue. Daddy, I look for you in other faces, 4 stained fingers, twist, twist inside, push, push. You must know that I loved you in hoops, blood and magic, and Hennessy. I'm sorry. In this hovel, you flash your dick on path trains changed by years of no goodness and violence. In this delusion, I meet your parents, have soft babies, you keep a steady job. Behind our house, framed in white flame, antlers draped with tiny lights we learned were beetles. Everyone's heard, I saw 2 king snakes fuck. Everybody knows, I know a secret. And I'm interested in this conversation because I'm not afraid. I think that these things are coming. And I think that trans people, disabled people, queer people signal something that should make everyone feel very nervous. And I think that trans people and disabled people, I would say, are in the best position to articulate the kind of danger that we are all in, and that trans people have been made to be the canary in the coal mine for a larger rise of fascism.
Child, this new book can't come quick enough. Thank you, Saray. I appreciate you always. Next we gonna meet the Kay Ivor. Kay is a non-binary trans poet from Mississippi. Their poems have appeared in Boston Review, Gulf Coast, Puerto del Sol, Salt Hill, and like a million other places. Their book, short film starring my beloved's Red Bronco, won the 2022 Ballard Spar Prize for Poetry. It's already out. Yay. It just came out earlier this year. Kay is the 2021 and 2022 Ronald Wallace Fellow for Poetry at the Wisconsin Institute for Creative Writing. They have a PhD in poetry from Florida State University. Kay, talk to me.
I'm going to read from the book, short film. It's a poem called Anti-Elegy. I apologize in advance that I have a head cold. I'm really happy to be here in this beautiful space with poets I'm starstruck by. Thank you. Anti-Elegy. If you were here, the Mississippi would still run south, would still drop its griefs in the Gulf, where our friends would still swim in summer. Water would touch us like water. If you were here, the river that is your body would not move magically. While it emptied from the bladder's headwaters, from tear ducts and pores, public officials would still turn the facts of your body into arguments. You might have struck the impossible. Surgery, a new name, your own boat, and someone beautiful to name it after. Someone beautiful and their baby. From one dorm room landline to another, your wish list sounded like a fairy tale, like growing a merman's fin between classes. I thought we were playing pretend when you said, "Good night, Tinkerbell," and I said the boy's name you wanted secret. Even then, strangers spoke to a boy when speaking to you. That was 20 years ago. The list already a plan, already gliding an undercurrent sprung 20 years before that. If you were here, still drinking cold tea in a cold diner, men in state capitol conference rooms, hours down the highway, would still draft bathroom laws for adults. Your mother would still sneak taffeta and silk in your closet of fatigues and say she loved you. I wouldn't imagine your capillaries reassembling. If you were still dying like the rest of us, I wouldn't tell a young ghost how far we've come as if I believed how far we've come was enough. Wouldn't worry about who else gets more than 27 years. Your body wasn't a national average. You wanted more than safety. But I didn't wake sore in the jaw until I heard the numbers, until a nation, an entire nation, couldn't offer an alibi. Missy, my grief is righteous and problematic. It floods the last four walls holding you and begs for time. It hurls absurd reasons from a future. A handful of trans film actors, humanizing a handful of trans characters. Better doctors. My grief says it's helping, but argues only for me. The relief, the microsecond of relief when I achieve the unexpected and hope you find out. This means I forget you're gone. This makes my grief a loose dam. Still, I talk to the water that unrivered your body for dirt. I float fantasies of dirt that hold us up longer. I say to the water, if you were here, you'd be here. I'm here partly because I would never say no to KB. And I'm excited to share the space with Saray and Giselle and Sophia and KB. And I'm also interested in the intersection of transness and disability and neurodivergence. And I read that poem partly because I've been really angry since these laws have been being passed this year and last. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. I want to talk about anger more. And I also want to talk about, I don't know, writing from a place of compulsory joy or grief and kind of resisting that compulsory subject matter for trans people.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kay. And of course, I will never say no to you either. I appreciate you. So last but certainly not least, Giselle James. Giselle, aka Lady Tournament, beamed down from LA in '92 and is re-uploading herself to the internet. Her professional career includes positions at Blavity, The Offing, Winter Tangerine, and more. She's been featured basically everywhere, but some of them, LA Times, Poetry Magazine, Oprah Magazine, among others. She's the author of Managed Tongues, and the 2021 Poetry Center Book Prize winning The Black Condition featuring Narcissists. Got that book, love that book. She curated Beyond Special, an issue, a collective critique on tokenism in trans poetry, and the Space Poetry Prize with Shade Literary Arts. She's edited lots of things. She does film, she does performance, she does it all right? She's been a Lambda Literary Fellow and a Precipice Art Grant recipient through Portland's Institute of Contemporary Art and an artist in residence at Ori Gallery. What I'm saying is Google her, all right? She raps. She's the founder of Tournament House Mutual Aid Fund. Find her, anywhere. And I don't know. I am so lucky to also have like all of my dream people on this panel. So I just wanted to say that because I'm done with intros. But thank you so much for each of y'all for being here. But I will now give it to Giselle so Giselle can read us a poem and answer the simple question, what interests you in this conversation?
Absolutely. Thank you, KB. This poem is called Local Woman Racist Lazarus. My next collection from Nightboat is called Local Woman, and there's various poems from this voice. But this is a retelling of Sylvia Plath's Lady Lazarus. I have wanted again for the third cycle of 10, I figure it, each day a walking miracle, my skin soft as a weekly needle, my waistline a paperweight, My face a shifting queen-size pillowcase. Untuck the dripping my paramour. Do I satisfy? The supple tightness, the full use of hands, the sour throat will last only then. Then my flesh, a grave dug, ate out. My home in me and I, a local woman, I am almost 32, and like the cunt, I had no time to lie. Almost 4 years without alcohol felt a waste to annihilate every vice. What a million fractals the hand grab gathering clicks on to see. Them review me wig and breast, no big striptease, sir. These are my hands, my tongue. I may be rare and willing. Irregardless, I am the same woman you wanted. The first time I didn't know he was an incident. The first time I wanted to last, I can't remember. I rooted down as a daffodil. My mother called and my father calls and spit the heathen off me like holy water. Dying is a poem I can finish myself. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like rent. I do it so it feels lasting, which is to say, I have a call. It's easy enough to do it in a spiral. It's easy enough to do in an episode. It's the backstage, shambles and lost time. Now's a worse place, a better face, the same brute, desperate yelp. Fuck, I'm beautiful. I'm my own knockout. I never charge. For the eye of my thirst, I never charge. For the playing of my role, I'm really something, and I never charge enough, at least for my word or touch or the bits of blood or the wig or my pleasers. Then, Mr. Sir, then, Mr. Paramore, I am yours open. I am yours presently. The secret silver metal I'll melt to a shriek. I moan and groan. Only you underestimate your great concern. Drip, drip, I toss and gaze. Sweat, spit, there is nothing real. A box of joints, a girlfriend's call, a tarot reading. Mr. Daddy, Mr. Baby Boy, you close? You close? Out of the drip, I rise with my natural hair, and I smoke men like air. I'm interested in this conversation because I actually am scared. I genuinely am scared. I don't. I am empowered by those who are braver than me, but I do live in a kind of fear that I did not expect, and I like to hear how other people make it. And so I'm really excited to be in this space. I'll shout out to my mom who's watching. She lives in DC. And so I was like, I'll be in DC sort of. And so shout out to my mom who's the queen. But yeah, I'm really happy to be here. And I also connect to another KB.
10, 10, 10s across the board for all of y'all. I really, really appreciate y'all. So I can, and thank you so much, Giselle. So I could talk to y'all all day, as you know. But, right, I want to contain this within about 20 minutes because I do want to open us up for questions from the audience. First thing I want to ask is for y'all, any of y'all who want to answer, I have no rules, right? Define trans poetics. What does that mean to you? And what has that meant to trans poets throughout history? I ask because I've heard that term like uttered, but I'm like interested in a definition. Or if it needs a definition, like that's also a concern. But yeah, like what does that mean to you, especially now, and what has that meant throughout history?
I guess I have done some thinking around trans poetics, as my bio has stated, not alone, but also in conversation. And I think that I think that trans poetics, my only concern with it is that I hope we can always be beyond time. I feel like the taste for trans poetics is like talking about the now, talking about the things that are important, but like there are people who are doing that work, and then there are artists doing other work. And so it's like if we are all forced to constantly politicize our poetic, again, which is fair, like what else can we be doing? And so like I think like Hay said, writing from like compulsory joy versus the other compulsory things we're sort of told to. So I think that trans poetics is pretty wide, but as long as it resists what is sort of demanded of us, I think it's doing the work it's supposed to. Like we can talk about the now if it's for us, but like resisting the demands of the greater world, I think is a pretty critical aspect of trans poetics.
I want to add to that, which is to say that I think it's hard to talk about trans poetics without talking about the subtext, even though like I don't want to talk about the subtext because there's always this element that's like, I don't give a fuck if you don't know. But then also, on the other hand, I sometimes feel like with other trans writers is the only place I feel completely safe or completely understood, without having to do a lot of emotional labor to explain myself, which I grow more and more tired of every year. I'm becoming a crotchety old man. If you don't know, like, I really don't want to explain it to you. So then there's this element of like how much of our poetics can be understood by those who are not trans, like cis people reading our poems. Like, do they read the subtext? And like, yeah, like I said, as much as I don't want to talk about that, I feel like there is that element there. And like, even if we don't write to explain or don't write to intend that everyone will understand the subtext, I feel like it's there. Like it's there. And it is something that we have to carry, even though, you know, we're capable of getting strong enough to not be super encumbered by it. It's still something that's always there. And transcending that and writing towards joy, I think, is like the ultimate goal always for me as well. And just thinking that like I have this like series where I read a poem to my coworkers at my day job every Friday called Poem Friday, and I've read actually one of all of your poems, so it's cool to be here. Oh, I almost lost my train of thought, but I didn't. Hang on. Thinking about how like explaining to them that poems are not meant to be understood, they're meant to be felt. And like I lean into that when it comes to my trans poetics, because I'm like, you know what? If you're not all the way here with me, just feel it out. Just feel it out. Do your best. And so I guess that's what I wanted to add.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Saray.
Yeah, I think that trans poetics is hard to define just because it precedes our modern understanding of what it means to be trans, right? Like whenever I use like term like queer, trans, I say queer or queered, right? Or trans or transed. And I think that allows more space for like elders who may have used different terms. And I think that one of those for me is definitely Gertrude Stein, right? And I think like I don't think that there's a way to like think of Gertrude Stein neatly as non-trans. So I think that I'm not pushing too far, but even what is it in Stanzas in Meditation, like I call carelessly that the door is open, which once it is open, no one can rush to close. Let it be mine, therefore everyone knows that I chose. Like there's just like such a resistance to being understood, and maybe it's because I'm a weird kind of trans, but I think, you know, like that resistance to like neat understanding, that resistance to not even just to like the concept of gender, because like I'm not personally a gender abolitionist. I think gender is fine and fun and that people just have a right to their genders. But another thing that I would say, well, I guess Amy Wright is non-binary, so again, not a push, but thinking about the point in joking where, you know, I could have been your sister, I would have been your brother. I think that there's just like so much of that linguistic resistance. And like, even like to go much earlier, like, of course, Billy and Morningstar, et cetera, it is a reference to Tiresias, right? And that resistance to comprehension is immediate in the story of Tiresias, right? Like he will not tell people who gets more pleasure, right? But then like comes to a group and says, you know, it's women. And I think that for me is what trans poetics is. It's something so deeply a product of one's own self-knowing that to try to recount it is almost moot.
Oh my gosh, Saray, every time you talk or tweet, like 500 light bulbs go off in my brain. When you were talking about trans or history and elders, I immediately thought of Gertrude Stein. And when you said Gertrude, yeah, I often wonder if she were one of us. And talk about queering form. I mean, wow. Yeah. I think about queering form a lot. We often use that term or queering the essay, queering a poem, and what that actually means. And I like the verb that the verbiage, the syntax that you switched, Saray, with trans, like making it a verb, like maybe it's already been trans before we have like formulated a school of thought of what it is, right? I'm interested, like I said, in the intersection of transness and disability. And I think the laws that are being passed are reflecting, how much that matters. And for me, my own poetics is something I don't actually project on everyone else, because there are a lot of trans writers who are doing a lot of original work with form. And for me, I want my poems to be able to reach anyone on the neurodivergent spectrum. I want people to be able to read my poems if they're drunk or strung out or having like a really dark night of the soul. I want my language to be accessible, and I also don't want to compromise the beauty of that language either. And so I put probably way too much pressure on my poems than I should. But I also am thinking about the people on the other side of the page when I'm writing. And I just don't want to miss anyone who might, I don't know, need to feel some relief with their own pain, or be able to hold their own joy as well. Yeah, I want my own work to be able to, I don't know, swim through like the impossible current that someone's trauma might be holding them against focusing on a poem, for instance. Like, there's so many reasons to not read the poem, and there are many special interests doing a lot of work for us to make sure that we don't. I mean, our phones are like one example of that. Yeah, many other things to look at. And so yeah, right now I don't want my own poetics to get in the way of that connection.
I wanted to add to that because I love what everyone expanded and thought through. But there was this conversation about sort of like who's it for and like not caring, and I really appreciate, Kay, how you brought it back to no, I do care about who's on the other side, and like not in a dichotomous way. Like you have to like not pander in any way, but still like there is a care for whatever reader does come across your work. And in a like sort of like similar parallel, incomparable way, like I write for Black people before trans people in my head. Like I'm writing for Black people, and usually like Black girls and Black femmes, and like Black femininity is like the person on the side of my page in my heart is always going to be someone who has lived through, navigated, survived, is experiencing and delighting in Black femininity in some way. And but also because of that, like there is, I think about, especially in my work now, I think more about like womanhood than even transness in some ways, because like I just happen to be in more community with non-trans women, and so like the spaces that I'm navigating, the dangers and the threats, like I have a different sort of foundation for it. And so like when I'm writing to the girls who I'm hanging out with, I'm writing to the girls in my life, people in my life. And so I think that like, yes, I do want to resist like fostering narratives of death and tragedy and trauma, but I also like really do love archiving the present for like the people in my life, the women in my life, the Black people who I am hoping can see themselves, through my work across gender. Yeah, it's a resistance to like the depth of it all, but not a resistance to legibility for me. And like I think other parts of my work are like less legible, like some of my music, some of my visual work, but like I do want my writing to be able to hit as many heads as possible. And like that is pretty central to my poetics, but I don't even think of it as trans poetic, but sort of like a Black legibility, and like a femme sort of like in like a femme like shadow language, like I want the girls who get it to get it. And then yeah, so I believe in the resistance of the trans poetic, but I'm not against legibility for those who I'm speaking to, and like access to my work for sure.
See, now y'all making me realize maybe we just need to write a craft book about trans poetics. I'm like, the publishing girlies in the audience, like, let's make it happen. Cause I love that. And I was like kind of expecting it, but I was like, I'm not gonna project that onto y'all, like this resistance of definition. And I think it's like very interesting and like necessary as a person, right? It's this resistance. And then also like through poetics, it's this resistance and like this kind of personalization. I love that there were some like common themes of like rebirth and common themes of like care, right? Like each of us, even when it's that kind of like legibility, it's like, well, I want some things to be illegible because I care about like who it is legible for, right? And we always as poets are negotiating kind of that like, what do I want to make clear, quote unquote, and what do I not, right? I like that. I like all the things. So you bring up Sophia bring up kind of like form, and I really love that. I think all of y'all's work, like one kind of thing that I saw is like this resistance to genre, or this like genre bending, or seeing genre as like a suggestion versus like I'm gonna stay within this. We all consider ourselves poets, but like I know that poetry is not the only thing that's informing what we do. So I want to know for each of y'all what drives you to like hybrid genre work. Do you see that as quintessential to your trans poetics? Why or why not?
I think whenever a Black person does something that white people don't understand, they say that they're bending genre. I don't know that I'm very interested in bending genre. I think that I'm interested in writing long poems. And, I got an MFA for Columbia because at the end of the day, I'm, what do they call it? I guess shrewd, like where it's like, I see what way the bread is buttered. I'm a disabled person. I have systemic lupus, so a death disease. And I didn't have a lot of time to waste. So, I went to Columbia and constantly I was asked why my poetry was poetry. Like that was something that came up a lot, was poets asking me why my poetry was poetry. And I was very confused with that because poetry is my first language. It's like all I know. And so making weird little poems, it's like, well, that's what I came to do. I thought that y'all were gonna be nerds and stuff, but that was not the case. So I think that there's more a disposal of, like, I feel more of a disposal of me from the genre than I do a challenging of the genre itself, because I'm very happy to be a poet, like I am a poet. I accept the stain of that and the complications of that, and also the greatness of that. And I think that the rigidity around what is poetry and how poetry should be, in the same way that, like, because I perform poetry, white people frequently call me a slam poet, even though that is a tradition with its own history. It's a wonderful tradition. It's not an insult to be called a slam poet, but it's not what I do. Like that's not what I do. So, and it's not the community that I'm in, even more than doing. Like that's not the community that I emerged from or am in. So, I think that there is a way that genre is actually a way of defining or keeping knowable to outsiders. I think that, what you said, Giselle James, is that that is very important, right? There are people for whom my work is intended and it is important they understand. But I think that what I'm talking about is more for those who do not understand my work in order to fit it into whatever mold they think is appropriate for my body. And I think that that is a part of the award process. It's a part of the publishing process, right? Is to like decide where this body fits, decide what you think is appropriate, like especially for myself as a formalist. Like I'm committed to form, I'm committed to breaking and remolding forms, but I am a formalist. And I don't think that there's not a comfort in ceding that ground for like a white publishing world to think of Black people as like doing formalism, like that is like experimental. Like I don't know that I have so much of a distaste for genre or desire for hybrid work as any Black experiment is seen as inherent hybridity.
I try to treat form. I'm definitely not a formalist by any means. But whenever I do try to use a form, I try to treat form the way like Whitney Houston treated "And I Will Always Love You." Like I try to do a really phenomenal cover that's like more iconic than whatever it was. The poem that I read today is a like line for line retelling of Lady Lazarus. If you put my poem and that poem side by side, like down to line lengths, like it is a beat for beat, measure for measure, cover in a way. But also like Celia Plath write that shit. Like she can have written what I wrote. And so I have sort of like that approach whenever I'm writing like actual like poetic form or navigating like a writing tradition. Like I imagine it like doing a cover. Like I imagine it like I want to honor this by rearranging it to my key, to my orchestration, to my sort of frequency in that way. And it doesn't feel resistive in the way that like I like hey like Black vernacular is just the way it breaks language, but it is still like an inherited tongue. We're still speaking English. It's not English. It's still this like forced colonized language. And so it's like when I'm doing form, it's sort of that same sort of like approach. Like I can rupture this in a way that makes me and my body feel comfortable and have people who may not have access to Sylvia Plath understand what I'm doing here. But like it is, I feel the same level of distance as I do, just like speaking normally. It is a reappropriation of like of a form of language. But yeah, I don't feel resistance to form, but whenever I approach it, it is to remix it and rupture it in a way.
Yes, I love that both of y'all, like, absolutely, I would call y'all like poets, right? But I think like from a craft perspective, people would consider both of y'all experimental and like exploring like, what is that about? And like, I see that a lot ascribed to trans poets, right? So I'm just like, is it hybrid genre work, or is it like a insistence of like making the genre your own and like pushing the boundaries of like what a poem can be? So I like that about both of y'all's work, and yeah. Interesting. Hey, or Sophia, yeah.
Just like one small thing is that I think that the idea of like hybridity and experiment is different, because I think that like hybrid form is like, okay, it transcends, it blends, but like, yeah, like absolutely experiments. I love to experiment, and I think a experiment is essential, right? But like, I think that there is a white supremacy to being so bound to tradition that anything experimental is hybrid.
Yeah, agreed.
I actually have an inner rebel, I guess, when it comes to form. Like when I try to sit down and write a sonnet, I'm like, who are you to tell me how many lines I can use and what I think it took me so long to figure out how to write in a discernible voice that sometimes when I try to go and write something like that, I don't know, my younger selves would think were really difficult, like it's Sestina. I feel rebellious, but I also think about what Diane Seuss says about the sonnet, and she calls the sonnet a mother. And Diane and Terrence Hayes and Wanda Coleman made me like the sonnet again, I think. And so I've been writing in form a lot more to see what can happen and how accessible my language can be in that form. But I still don't know what genre means. No one can really tell me what it means. Just like no one, I'm writing about this, but no one can really tell me what forgiveness means. Like I'm just, like what are these words? And how can I actually use them in a way that feels precise when they can't be? Yeah. And another question I often ask when I'm writing in any form, like right now I'm writing a book of essays and experimenting with those, with what the essay can do. I'm like, who is the genre for? Yeah. That's an important question, or a kind of pressure that I like to put on anything I'm writing in any form, even if it's like just couplets versus a whoosh down the page. Like, who are these couplets for? Like, versus who is this other kind of form for? Yeah.
I think about this a lot because I have a degree in playwriting and directing, and I do screenwriting, and I do nonfiction and fiction and poetry, but my poetry is what's like most known. And like I find that it makes people like really uncomfortable that they don't know where to place me. Like people never know where to place me. So I think it makes them most comfortable to place me as a poet. So I'm always just like, okay. But I think when it comes to form, like in a very queer way, I just try to listen to the piece. Like I just try to be like as present as possible with the piece. And I do the Shira Ehrlichman process. If any of you have ever worked with her, her editing process is just incredible, but she'll have any upwards of like 24 drafts of a singular poem, trying it in so many different ways. And I try to do that as well. Like, and I do that when I edit other people's poems. I will actually like take their poem, copy and paste it and be like, Sophia, remix 1. And then we've done this back and forth a couple of times, but I'll try the poem like 10 different ways. And then when I decide that the poem is going to be in tercets, I kind of know why now, because I tried it so many different ways, and like this version of the poem and I were able to communicate, like it felt the most correct. But I almost think of like writing as almost just like translating the essence of the piece, whatever that may be. And it might be a poem, but then I have a lot of prose poems that could probably work for Flash. And I have a lot of fiction that has a lot of poetry in it. I also think this might be a hill I would die on, though I'm not usually in the business of dying on hills. But I think that all good writing has poetry in it. Like there's poetry somewhere, especially screenwriting. I think screenwriting is one of the most poetic forms. And so I don't really know. I think kind of in terms of my transness, I feel the same way about writing. Like I don't really know where I fit, but I exist. And the proof of that is that I'm here and that all my pieces end up finding a home somewhere, whatever people want to call it.
Yes, I love this conversation and the trajectory and the possibility like within the form that all of y'all like create. Again, I would talk to y'all forever if I could, but I do want to end on this question and then nod to any questions on the live stream that we might have. What can people do to support trans writers right now? And how can people support your work in particular right now?
I think like if you're here and you listen to these brilliant writers talk, please go follow them, buy their books, pre-order their books. I think something I really want to push is like if you're going to a public event for a trans writer, like please take the time to like learn their pronouns. And if you don't ask them about it unless you're asking literally what their pronouns are in order to respect them. And then maybe also read up on some like trans microaggressions beforehand so that you're not putting us in uncomfortable positions in public. And what KB said before this panel, we're not here to like justify our humanity. So like, you know, if you're engaging with us, like don't ask us to do that. And yeah, I think, yeah, support trans writers, buy their books from them directly or from bookshop or an indie bookstore somewhere. And yeah, read them to your friends. For me, I'm going to be announcing something kind of cool within the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited about that. And you can follow me on all the things. It's at Sophia Faye Creates. Now that this whole Twitter imploding situation is happening, I have way too many social media platforms. So you can just find me at Sophia Faye Creates on any of those.
Don't be shy. I can jump in and be like, hey, follow all of them as well. And also like supporting trans writers means like buying Translit. And also like doing the next step. People say like read more, right? When talking about like trans lives and like misinformation around that. But I think the next step is like allowing yourself to be changed by what you read. Read it and apply it to your life. I think that like there's no way, you know, one can read a Saray book or a Kay Ivor book and not like then be like, all right, so how can I show up as a better person? Like make sure you take that next step is what I would say, like read intensely, read closely, and read with the intent to be changed. And that's for like folks, you know, outside of said communities and like also trans writers knowing like Translit is alive right now. There's so much goodness, luckily, coming from trans writers. So making sure that you like dip into that renaissance, like I love, you know, when I meet other trans people at shows and know that trans people are reading it, because it's like, yeah, I'm talking about specific experiences that I want like to feel like a mirror to trans like readers. So yeah, that is my answer for that.
If you want to support, you can go just James. I was just gonna say it's financial support. I think that most trans writers need. You know, I'm thankfully, you know, I have 3 jobs, but I'm also someone who with lupus. But it's actually not about writers like I would say me, you know, like I've been thankful to have some award prizes wins, have several jobs. But I can think of especially Black trans poets. You know, I'd be remiss in lying if I didn't say especially some Black trans women poets who I know are more talented than me, who are not writing right now and are not making books because they could not find or were not supported enough by their community to continue publishing. So I think that it really is important that if you support trans writers, you should do so with money, financially, not just buying books. You should give them money.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. I didn't want to come out the gate with that because it is surprisingly hard to convince people to give trans people money. And like buying a product is fine, and like, but like I got an advance in my book. You can buy, you can the blacklist could sell out right now, and I may get a few $100 from it in a year. So it's like buying books is great coming to the events is great, but like we have to live between all these events. We have to live between our books. We have to live, and like I know some Black trans writers who like who have jobs and are able to like to navigate, but like outside of like institutions and or like tech companies, we're hustling. Like I know very few Black, especially Black trans femme writers who are able to like hold down consistent work and create. And like the last Black trans woman to win the literary prize, like basically has not had support to be making another book. The publisher who published her first book folded. You know what I mean? And so like she's literally why I wanted to go to land. You know what I mean? And so like we even have these tent poles of trans artists in very recent history who are already being like brushed to time and erased in time. And that is mostly because we're not being supported in our actual lives. Like, yeah, our those PDFs will still be online, I guess, but like, are we eating? Are we eating? Are we surviving every day? And we're not. So yeah, support trans people directly, financially. Yeah, their art is great, but like it is a fraction of what they're able to do because it's so hard to be alive. And not just in a legislative, political way, but literally walking home every day is fucking hard. It is hard. And so yeah, the security of food and shelter and transportation are life-changing for most trans people, but especially like Black and trans people of color in any city, in any rural area. Like getting home is treacherous enough. And so like trying to create art, trying to find joy, trying to archive reality is harder when you have to survive it. So yeah, direct financial support beyond just like our labor that you can see is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. 10 out of 10. Was going to add that like at the end as well. So hit up that Venmo, hit up that Cash App, hit up the DMs if you ain't got that, especially for Black trans women writers, especially for, like, yeah, we can't write books when it's like we can't put like money on the table. We also can't write books and like all of them be banned, right? So like if you are trying to support trans writers, you also need to be like tapped into like what's happening in 49 out of 50 states right now, which is book bans, which is trying to ban trans people from the public, right? So I guarantee you that whatever state you live in probably has like a organization that is like addressing these things. Get tapped into those organizations, all right? Don't rely on trans people to be the only people fighting for trans rights. We're tired, all right? So like we need other people also that are not trans like doing this, right? Showing up to those legislative meetings, like putting the money into those like oftentimes underfunded organizations that are doing the organizing around fighting anti-trans laws. So please do that. Sorry we went over time. I am, yeah, sorry about that. I knew it would happen though, because again, all of these writers are very dynamic. If you want to, I see some like questions in the chat that we didn't get to. I'm sorry about that, but please tap into all of us. We are going to put in the chat like everybody's social media handle. Please go follow these writers. Please buy the books. Please directly support with funds. And please, like, do the work that you need to do to combat, these laws happening in our local communities. But yes,